Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
And in our view, the best way to start experimenting with IoT is to pick out a small pilot case that augments existing system functionality and creates some new business case. And a kind of extension of the existing systems. Because if any major changes are required, that will inevitably lead to internal conflicts.
Before talking go-to-market strategy, we need to talk go-to-greenlight strategy. For most people, internal or external, IoT is a big unknown, and unknowns are scary. To get that IoT pilot started, think small and evolutionary. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Michael Minkevich about his experience in building IoT products and systems and the best way to get them greenlit.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars. Stay tuned for Bruce's private reserve. I'm preparing 25 exclusive videos, presentation decks, and special reports for people that sign up on my website, www.iotinc.com. You'll also receive my newsletter every couple of weeks where I'll let you know what's new, and I'll analyze something of interest in the IoT business world. And if you'd like to find out more about me, your host, Bruce Sinclair, and the services I provide, just head over to iot-inc.com/about or send me an email at bruce@iotinc.com. I'd love to work with you. I just came back from Chicago where I'm working with a new client, and it's been a lot of fun. With me today on episode 39 is Michael Minkevich. Michael is VP of Technology Services at Luxoft, where he is responsible for the company's product engineering portfolio that covers telecom, energy and utilities, digital media, consumer electronics, and, of course, the Internet of Things. Michael is a computer engineer by background and has almost 20 years of industry experience. Michael was a student of mine in one of my workshops, and we've kept in touch ever since. After getting to know him a little bit better and what his company does, I thought he'd be a great guest to have on the show. Michael, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad you invited me here.
So what have you been busy on? I understand you've been a little bit busy this week.
Oh, yeah. The period between a holiday break is always abundant of different events, and we received a number of interesting, massive RFPs, and for some reason, our customers decided to make use of the time before holidays to load us with a bunch of interesting requests to keep us busy over the holiday break.
Holidays. Yeah, right. That's right. They could just sort of send it off, and they can relax, knowing that they've got stuff working while they're enjoying holiday making. Then, what have you been seeing lately? Have you been seeing an uptake in terms of RFPs? Has it been pretty steady? Let's say in the last 6 months.
We've been observing steady growth in terms of demand for our services in general, and that applies to my domain as well. So overall, that should reflect a current status of the economy, and despite of many apocalyptic predictions, we are still doing great.
You're still doing great. And the Internet of Things, you're seeing a nice, or what type of growth are you seeing that over the last, say, year or 6 months?
I would say that our customers are getting more familiar with this IoT topic, and it's gradually moving from the hype category to our more a kind of articulated, more well thought and well shaped business proposition. Let me put it this way.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I'm happy you said business proposition. So you're seeing, you're seeing more incomings. Are you going and pitching your existing customers too, or is it more you're just letting the business come to you at this point?
I think it's a little bit of both. We have a kind of business blueprints, IoT scenarios for several verticals, including retail, logistics, and of course we are approaching our existing customers and pitching them and trying to convince them to start IoT related initiatives and pilots. But at the same time, we are creating general awareness and educate our potential customers about what IoT is all about, and how we can help them with transforming their business and building value using sensor and data technologies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, given your portfolio, I would think that your clients, they'd be well suited for IoT. When you go to them, what's the typical response? Is it, I've heard of it, but I haven't thought about it, I've never heard of it, or we're working on it? What's the temperature gauge for your current clients?
Well, in general, our customers are well familiar with IoT, what IoT is all about.
Okay.
And they, practically all of them are very excited about IoT, but not many really understand, practical implications and how IoT can help them to improve their businesses. And this is and this is where we can come to rescue and help them discover the value of Internet of Things and sensor technologies.
Right. So what you're saying is they've heard about it. They kind of think like they probably should do something about it, but they're not clear yet as to the approach. Is that a good summary?
Pretty much so.
Okay.
But at the moment, we see that a kind of mentality prevails when everyone is doing IoT, so we should do that too.
Right.
But what is lacking is articulated business cases.
So they're coming to you with just kind of like, we want to do this IoT thing, or is it more like an engineering approach, like a bottom-up approach where they're saying, yeah, we want to do we've got some great ideas for sensors, or is that kind of like
you won't believe how many engineering bottom-up driven cases you see.
Right.
Our boss told us, but we need to come up with IoT pilot, and let's do a kind of a cool sensors here and there. Let's connect them and see what's going to happen. And normally, it's a road to disaster.
It's paved with lots of broken sensors along the way.
Absolutely, and we see quite a few large-scale IoT initiatives abandoned halfway because there was no business substance, and we all know that no technology can possibly substitute the lack of thereof.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I've seen the same thing. In particular, and that is also actually why I even started my business, was the same thing. It was the tail wagging the dog, more of an engineering focus. And even if you are able to get a little bit of lift off, you're going to run out of fuel, because at some point you have to get out of your little lab and try to get some funding. And as soon as you start asking for funding from the funders within your company, then obviously this is where they run into these walls. And obviously that's the whole purpose of this show, and I can't wait to get your perspective. Michael and I have, we've had lunch before, we've gotten together before, and we think very similarly. So I don't think there's going to be too many disagreements. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but we both believe in the top-down approach, and we're going to get talking about it for the rest of the show. But Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Luxoft?
Let me start with Luxoft, kind of brief introduction of who we are and what we do. Luxoft is a global software house headquartered in Zug in Switzerland, listed here in the US at New York Stock Exchange.
Oh, okay.
We've been public since 2013. And we currently have roughly 11,000 engineers worldwide. Most of our engineering personnel is based in Europe. And here in the US, we have 4 offices in New York, Detroit, Michigan, here in the Valley in Menlo Park, and we also have large hub in Kirkland, Washington, out of Seattle. And that location is a core hub for our IoT practice.
Oh, okay. That's where the core is, up there. I didn't realize that.
It's pretty far. It's pretty far from Europe, and this is why we decided to use that location for handling our IoT project. And it's built around a company that we acquired 2 years ago called Radius.
Okay. No, I get it. And what about yourself? What's been your IoT experience?
I've been involved in what we now call IoT from 2003.
Okay.
Technically, the term IoT was coined back in 1999 by Kevin Ashton, but it started getting into mainstream only recently, maybe 5-6 years ago. But back in 2003, it was just after I joined the company, we had a so-called Luxoft lab, an innovation facility focused on emerging technologies. And we were looking for interesting things complementary to our core service portfolio. And then we started experimenting with wireless sensor networks. That was a predecessor of Zigbee.
Sure.
And active RFID tags, multi-agent systems used for security, logistics, retail. And this is how the whole journey started. And since then, we have completed a number of interesting projects in energy and utilities, in automotive, connected car, industrial manufacturing, building automation. And 3 years ago, the whole IoT thing started developing pretty rapidly. We decided that we need to consolidate all activities related to IoT under one roof and build a kind of horizontal practice that would span across a number of industry verticals to accumulate all relevant knowledge about IoT, both on the business and the technology side, and serve as an execution platform for all IoT-related projects. And eventually, we ended up with buying Radius, and now we are completing that exercise on building the horizontal practice. So so far it's been very successful, and our customers have been quite enthusiastic about the extended offering we currently put on the table.
Yeah, well, you've actually, most people I asked a question, I even asked a question of myself, but how long you've been in IoT, and it's the same sort of answer, in the sense of, well, it depends on how you define it, but it wasn't this. But when you say you've been doing sensor networks, lossy sensor networks since 2003, Yeah, you can't argue with that one. That's real IoT experience. 12 years worth, jeez.
Bruce, seriously, many things what we now call in IoT have been around like forever, like SCADA systems or telematics applications. That's why, despite the fact that many of our listeners consider IoT as a revolutionary thing, in my view, it's just evolution of M2M systems and internet. And I dare say that in, say, 5-6 years from now, will be no such thing as IoT. Will be just internet with smart devices of different degree of intelligence participating in the internet as first-class citizens.
I knew this was going to happen. Okay, so I'm agreeing with you. I think like I predicted at the beginning, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, the Internet of Things is just the Internet, and it's just an evolution. But I think, it is important to draw the distinction between a SCADA system, which in some cases is an M2M system, and utilizing the Internet. Being able to bring to bear the Internet specifically with, gathering data and being able to compute data, and more importantly, being able to attach different microservices or pull different services from around the Internet that was typically only available to, web developers, that type of development. I think that is an evolution, but it is different, right? I mean, I think, it is very different than what M2M was and then predecessor to that, SCADA.
Right. And if you allow me a philosophical retreat, okay. I would say that the key distinction between old M2M world and the new brave new world of IoT, if you will, is distributed intelligence.
Okay.
And now our more and more intelligence and decision-making authority is being delegated downstream. To the edge and to the device level. And eventually we'll end up with that cloud, a fog, if you will, of intelligent devices capable of taking autonomous decisions. And if you're familiar with Open Folk Foundation, Open Folk Consortium, so this is a relatively new organization comprised of academia and industrial members, and they are focusing specifically on developing standards and different interoperability models for distributed smart devices.
Oh, okay, and then you must have heard. We're in December of 2015 now, but you must have heard about the recent consortium, the Fog Computing Consortium, which Cisco is a big one of the founding members of it. It is different from that, right?
It's different.
Yeah, no, it seems to be the trend, and I think that that's a good distinction. Distributed intelligence.
And Bruce, you just touched a very interesting topic. You mentioned that there are two consortiums, two alliances focused on the same area, and this is a good reflection of what's going on in the IoT space, because there are so many players, and they are trying to push their own standards and alliances, and I would say that it doesn't contribute to the common good.
Yeah, no, and you're talking to someone that's lived through the networking standards wars, specifically in the IPv6 and specifically mostly in the IETF. The standards aren't generally being created by consortia. They're generally, trying to, but they still need to feed into an IEEE or an IETF. But man, that's a political game.
Oh, yeah.
And, large companies, they dedicate full-time resources to that political game, I should say, and there's a lot of personal relationships, and don't get me started on that.
We are not involved in that game whatsoever, and we are trying to be as platform and technology agnostic as possible.
And I think that's a good approach, and I'm also a big believer in in de facto standards, and de facto standards are created when you actually do something, and you don't just focus on just the standard itself. And IETF, if we want to look at it, jump in a little bit. We've got 3 areas of standardization. We've got the radios, which I think we're in good shape. We're getting new radios like LPWA, which makes sense because that is a very distinct use case, and you don't want to standardize, I don't think there. On the networking, the networking protocol level, this is where we can use a lot of standardization, in particular going from IP and extending IP into all the, the OT networks. And then lastly, the application protocol space, again, you're going to need to standardize that a little bit, but there's still different architectures and there's still different requirements. So it's just a bigger ball of wax, there's just a lot more to it. But standardization would be great, but I think just because of the breadth of IoT, you're not going to end up with just a couple standards, I guess is, again, depending on where you look at it. Don't you see what I mean, or do you agree with what I'm saying?
I'm totally agree with you. And by the way, if we want to jump into technicalities, it's worth mentioning.
Can't help doing that.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning low power WAN technologies, and I believe that with their wider proliferation, they can make a major breakthrough.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, no, I think it's awesome time right now, and we had one show where we had a couple of the players, Laura and Sigfox on it. But I just like that space just because I like that space in a lot of ways. Technically, sure, it's cool, but I like it from a business perspective just because the costs associated with it are so much lower that they open up a whole number of different, I guess, business cases that can actually utilize connectivity, where in the past, when they've had to use cellular technology just because of the licensing costs that are associated with that, it just becomes prohibitive, and it only allows certain business use cases to be viable under that financial structure. With LPWA, it kind of wipes out a big part of those costs, and that's why I'm excited, right? I mean, I'm excited by the things that's happening today, but I'm also excited about the things that we haven't even thought about yet, because the costs are going to be dropping, that it's just going to open it up to so many different opportunities.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about technologies, about the things, about connectivity protocols, but it's also worth mentioning data, because in my view, IoT is all about data.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we kind of discussing plumbing, but what really represents value for IoT systems application is data, what we collect from the underlying assets, and how we transform that data and use it for decision making.
That's right. No, that's right. And of course, I want to get into that. And that's related, obviously, to the application protocol and being able to contextualize the data, early on, so that you can ingest it efficiently, and then you can use it efficiently within your application is super important. But we digress. I'm interested in finding out just a little bit more about you. What's an interesting fact that most people do not know about Michael Minkevich?
I'm not a public persona as such. That's why
not a public persona.
Most.
I know, but you're public now. By definition, you are.
Most details of my life might be a little bit obscured. But speaking about myself, I've been doing weightlifting for 20 years before. Switching to endurance training,
right?
And I completed my first marathon in September.
Awesome! Congratulations.
Thank you. Not sure it's my cup of tea, but I felt like I had to do that.
I think at mile 18, it's nobody's cup of tea, but the fact that you finished it. Which one did you do? Just out of curiosity.
You won't believe, but. I just, my goal was to run a marathon, so I didn't participate in any public event. So I ran it in my hometown, Redwood City.
What, you just measured it out and you just ran that distance? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's by definition, marathon is
I
a distance.
didn't
So
need a medal.
to prove you went the distance.
Yeah, but it's more about like achieving certain result and proving that I can make it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it took a lot of training to get there as well.
Absolutely. I think it took me like 6 months to get into shape. But running 3-4 hours in a row is so boring.
I know it is boring, and that's why they have organized marathons, Michael. That makes it so much different. I mean, you can obviously be listening to this podcast while you're running, and that makes it far more exciting. But the whole idea behind the marathon, and I've done a few myself, is that you just have that energy. There's so many people that are running with you. There's people on the side of the road. And I think that makes a huge difference, than when you're doing it on your own. Most people, I don't know about you, but most people will not train beyond 20 miles just because, just what you said. Well, one, you're prone to get injured, and then you may also be to the point where you can't train. It's better to train less and train more than train a big bump like that and then be out for a little while. But I think a big part of it is it's just like you said. It's all in your mind, right? It's really mental when you start getting into those numbers.
Yeah, you're really good at convincing people. So I'm gonna sign up for a public marathon next year.
I guarantee it'll be a far more enjoyable. It's not so much just to get the medal, but I think it's just the experience. It really is. It really is the experience. All right. Well, that's interesting, and well, maybe we should talk, and maybe we'll sign up. I've been thinking about signing up for one as well. We talked a little bit about the IoT projects. So just to be clear, and I know we've had this discussion, but you're not a system integrator, right?
We may be thought as a next generation system integrator,
okay.
More software centric.
More software centric, and beside you, I mean, you mentioned telematics, and you mentioned what are some of the other ones? You mentioned communications. Are these more pilot projects, or are you actually also working on developing IoT products like a discrete object, a discrete product itself?
We are doing both.
Okay.
And our main focus is development of end-to-end IoT systems and applications. But normally we start from a smaller prototype proof of concepts that will gradually evolve into full-fledged systems, provided that the proof of concept is successful for our customer.
Right. Yeah, and I think as everybody on this show realizes that even an IoT product really is an IoT system, whether it's concentrated into an object that you can touch or not, they're all systems, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I want to get a feeling for our listeners just in terms of timing, just in terms of energy. So if we were to look at from the time you start to the time that you deliver a production, and I'll say product, but it could be system or it could be depending on the application. But what type of timing do you generally see to go from this concept? And the way I think of it, I go, Michael, I go concept, ideation, proof of concept, then I go prototype, then I go minimal viable product, and then product. I mean, there's different definitions, but using that definition, what's the type of time frame that you've been seeing that's required to get from that concept to starting the production of the product?
Oh, projects come in all shapes and sizes.
I know.
That's why it's difficult to define a kind of average timeline, how to get from a pilot to MVP to a full-fledged product. And if we consider like a consumer,
I know there's all the dimensions there too.
Yeah, so it's a smaller dimension, and if we are talking about a large agricultural system, it may take 2 or 3 years to complete. But in general, I would say that it takes from 2 to 4 months to complete a POC, and based on the POC piloting, customer can take a decision on whether we want to proceed with a large scale exercise.
And I know general or median, or average or median, whatever you want to use, but then 2 to 4 months, that sounds about right. Yep, that sounds about right. And then what about to get from the POC to that pre-production or pre-deployment time frame?
Again, depending on the scope of the project and its complexity, from 6 to 18 months.
Yeah.
It's a very broad range.
No, I know, but I think for our listeners, they're either on the buy side or the sell side, and in either case, it's just helpful to know that it's it's not 2 months and it's not generally 2 years. It's like you say here. If we do the arithmetic here, we're looking at maybe anywhere from 8 to 20. Well, I guess you've got 8 to 24 months here. So. But yeah, I would say, I would say again, you're going to have all different types of projects, but you should be budgeting at least a year in terms of time, that on average. I know it can be simpler, but we're looking at, this is not like an insignificant project, but obviously there's going to be some corner cases where you're going to be doing these large ones, like an ag, something like that, then it might be multiple years. Although I would hope, during that whole time that you're iterating with your customers and you've got many intermediate milestones along the way. How do you structure that? I mean, obviously you don't want to work for a year on something before you get some sort of validation. What do you do, Michael, in terms of the whole, I guess, feedback loop during development?
Normally we structure or we try to structure IoT project in an agile fashion. So we have multiple short iterations, and we always demonstrate the progress along the way. And there are well-developed frameworks and methodologies how to make it happen. But the key thing here is to keep experimenting and keep demonstrating progress to the customer, and get a customer involved into what's going on, and in many cases, customers start with a very vague idea of what they want to achieve in the end, and they may want to pivot the development roadmap somewhere in the middle of the road, and
at least once or twice.
At least once or twice. But again, getting back to my previous point, it's critically important to embark on any IoT project with a well-articulated business case. So, what kind of business problem that particular system has to resolve? What kind of business outcome has to be achieved?
Yeah, and I would go even further than that, and I would look at the value then. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And then what's the incremental value that you can bring to that? And then I would say, even before visiting a company like Luxoft, at least this is what I advise my clients on, is then have that initial. It just has to be maybe a 5 to 7 page business plan, but within that plan also have a requirements document, and very in particular information requirements, application requirements, and analytics requirements, so that when you do engage with the Luxoft, everyone's happier, right? I mean, you want a well-informed client, right?
Absolutely. And many of our customers ask questions, and I believe your clients do the same. Where to start the IoT journey, and for many of our customers, it's a first project related to sensor technologies, to IoT, and they don't have a clear vision on where exactly we need to start, and then it comes to large enterprise customers. They have multiple systems already in place, and in our view, the best way to start experimenting with IoT is to pick out a small pilot case that augments existing system functionality and creates some new business case, and a kind of extension of the existing systems. Because if any major changes are required, that will inevitably lead to internal conflicts, and once you don't have the business case proven, it's very hard to justify further investments. And if we have time, I can give you one example.
Yeah, of course.
I mentioned logistics as one of our focused verticals, and not surprisingly, logistics was one of among the first industries to benefit from telematics and MTM applications, and currently virtually all major companies already have pretty solid foundation comprised of significant number of legacy systems, both in the enterprise backend and for field operations. And that's why that evolutionary approach makes perfect sense. And some time ago, we built a smart tracking application for a large US-based transport company.
Okay.
And to give you some sense of what smart tracking is, these days practically all industry players offer freight tracking service, and in most cases free of charge. So the parcels or pallets or containers are scanned by RFID readers at connection hubs in ports or railway stations or warehouses, and for some categories of freight, that granularity is not sufficient, and the customers are willing to pay premium for higher transparency and better reliability. Okay. And the premium may be pretty high if, for example, Apple orders delivery of a new whatever iGadget from China to the US for Tim Cook's presentation at a major event in San Francisco. They really want to make sure that the parcel will arrive on time and intact. And if something really bad happens in transit, they have enough lead time to take corrective actions.
Right.
And what we did, our solution was comprised of an advanced telematic box equipped with GPS and GPRS modules and multiple sensors that could be customized for specific needs, like accelerometer, thermometer, like braking detector, and so on and so forth. And, to illustrate the idea of evolutionary approach, we started first phase of the project with just that box that was using existing backend infrastructure and enterprise messaging backbone.
And this box was in the vehicle? Am I understanding it? It was actually a box that would go in a vehicle?
Container, or it can be mounted on a box or a pallet.
Got it. Okay, got it.
So the key thing is it was just a box and just minor tweaks in the existing backend infrastructure. And once the pilot was successfully completed, the company started a massive rollout, and then we started changing underlying infrastructure to accommodate to increasing workload.
Right.
Yeah. So, but only then the need for such massive investment was proven. So,
I like that.
Yeah, so it's very simple, very straightforward. Standard free service has been extended with additional sensor functionality, and it turned into a new revenue generating product with just minor upfront investment.
Yeah, no, I like that. I promote something, or I preach something, depending on how you look at it, called the IoT business model continuum. And that's pretty much the second one. Have a product, but then have an extra service. And I like your approach where you're saying, yeah, if you're choosing what to do, and I think that makes logical sense. But if you're choosing, if you're trying to figure out what your first project should be, just augment an existing service or an existing product that you have today, and maybe, yeah, in this particular case, I don't know how the business model kind of sorted out, but I could see they could be offering the same service with maybe, an added, you can upgrade and see not only what transportation device it's in, but you can maybe check it on real time or something like that, and that would be kind of like an upgrade to a service that they could potentially charge for. What happened there from a business model point of view?
It's just premium freight tracking service. Okay. Yeah, they charge pretty significant premium for nearly real-time tracking capabilities.
Yeah. No, that'd be cool. Now this is going to have to be a lot more sophisticated than, say, these tiles. Like I've heard of. There's a number of different tracking tiles. One of them was actually GPS based. Or I don't know if it was both that and CDMA, but it could track your luggage. So what do you just put the tag on your luggage and you could actually go with your smartphone, see where it is within, well, hopefully it's within the airport. But if it's not, then I guess you could even see where it is. It's kind of like waiting where you left. But what's different about the technology than that you were talking about than with these tiles? I'm sure you're familiar with the ones I mean.
The main difference is just it provides more robust coverage and robust service and reliability.
Okay.
If for example your tile attached to your bag, loose connection, and you can track your suitcase for 2 hours because it it lies somewhere in the bottom of a huge heap of luggage. It's not a big deal, but for some sensitive and perishable goods in transit, that may be a major issue.
Yeah, no, by saying that, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's not an insignificant percentage, and I think it's over 10, and it might be approaching 20% of food that's perishable food that's transported that goes to waste. And this is one of the efficiencies. I mean, obviously, a lot of people love to talk about the IoT efficiencies, but this I guess would be one kind of example, would it?
Absolutely. I believe that many transport companies will gradually move towards applying more accurate tracking technologies for perishable goods, for different high value goods in transit. So,
no, for sure.
In my view, the logistics, along with retail, will be at the forefront for IoT system deployments. And another good example is precision agriculture. I really love that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and they're tied together too, right? Harvest the food and then transport the food. You could have a whole system there because, as we know, once you start linking IoT systems to each other, you're getting even more value.
Yeah, absolutely. I specifically like agriculture, precision agriculture example, because you can hardly find anything low tech and very down to earth than traditional agriculture.
Right, exactly.
But with sensor technologies, companies like John Deere, they do absolutely fantastic things.
Yeah, no, I know. Anywhere like mining is another example. Any industry that's been more or less the same for over 100 years, it's probably ripe for IoT. But let's get back to the budgeting on the project. So we're looking at we're looking at somewhere between 2 to 4 months, you're saying, to get to that proof of concept, another 6 to 18. And 18, I would think, would be a very sophisticated project to get to the product stage. Let's talk numbers now. Again, same thing, same caveats, I understand. But roughly, what are we talking in terms of money spent? Because listeners to this show are going to need to budget for this stuff.
The range can be very broad.
I know you're going to say that.
It depends on many factors. A customer needs specially designed hardware.
Yes.
Or we can use off-the-shelf components like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, Edison, or we need specially designed very high precision, accurate sensors. For example, if we consider a case of pharma companies and clinical trials, so they need very accurate sensors, and the cost for such devices may skyrocket. Then there we can use standard platforms for device provisioning, for data acquisition, for application enablement, or we just we need to build everything pretty much from scratch.
Well, let's say for the POC that you're using just off the shelf, because you don't necessarily have to design the custom work. But let's start there, break it down a little bit. So for the POC, let's say you're using Raspberry Pi or an Arduino or something like that. You're using an existing provisioning system. You're using a platform, so you're not reinventing the wheel. What are we looking at just for that first stage? Because that's important, right?
For POC, as I mentioned, you can safely bet that your budget will be in the range of 50 to 100K.
Okay. To get to the POC.
To get to the POC, and it depends on. Again, I've been saying it depends too many times, but well, I don't want to mislead our.
No, I understand. Well, you could say the median, and then that's not misleading anybody.
Yeah.
So the median.
So believe that
there's
a kind of well-defined template. You pay us 50 grand and you get your POC, disregarding of functionality and scope. But 50 to 100K is an average range for full-fledged proof of concept, ranging from sensor devices, the data acquisition, using standard cloud-based platform, and some data analytics and visualization.
Okay. No, that sounds reasonable. And what about now when you take it? Let's say, oh, great, we love the POC. Our customers love the POC. What about then taking it to the pre-production? Well, I guess it depends, right? Because in the system, you more or less, if it's like a telematics system, by the time you get to product, you're pretty much it's done, right? I mean, you're just going to deploy it at that point. But let's just squint our eyes and say to get to go from POC to P, or to P being product, so getting past the minimal viable product and getting all the way to the product, the end product, whatever that may be. What are we thinking about there?
It's a difficult question.
It depends, right?
Yeah. Again, I'm trying to avoid a standard beginning of the sentence, but money-wise, we can talk about from 1 to 2 million.
Okay, to get that final, and I think this reflects the size of the clients, and the projects that Luxoft takes on.
Not size of the client, but rather size of the project and the scale of deployment. And if we can use public cloud like Azure or AWS, or for some reason security or regulatory reasons, it should be hosted on-prem. and again, a need for custom hardware. We actually do hardware design as well, and different security provisions, performance of the system. If we need like real-time transaction processing or not. So the range may be really broad, but based on our experience, we can talk about anything between 500K to say 5 million.
Okay, so it's a pretty big range.
It's a pretty big range.
No, but that's helpful. That's helpful because there's different potential technology partners like Luxoft that are out there, and it's good to know. I mean, obviously the larger projects are going to take the larger teams, potentially with that very specialized expertise, and you guys are big swingers in this space. So you're getting some pretty big deals, and that's that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, obviously they can be smaller, but the ones that you guys are working on. This is helpful. Yeah, I would say you're probably more on the upper end edge of the range, right? The upper end of the range.
Pretty much so, because our main focus is on industrial IoT. By industrial IoT, I mean different B2B systems, as opposed to consumer applications. Because with all due respect and despite enormous hype in the media around consumer sensor technologies, I'm a bit pessimistic. And the adoption cycle will be pretty long, because people are buying IoT connected devices, but there are no real business cases how to make money on them.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, sometimes you can hit a home run, for example, with Fitbit. I had no idea they were $1 billion company until they went public, but I think that's an outlier, right? I mean, I think there are situations, but generally speaking, I agree. Right now, these crowdsourced fundraising or fund-raised projects are cool. I mean, you can get a prototype, and you can actually pay for X number of your first versions of your products with them, but then getting it going beyond that's where there seems to be a chasm. I mean, I speak with a lot of VCs, do some work with VCs, and that's one of the areas where we've identified a big trough, and that is getting from this in the consumer space, getting from that Kickstarter kind of kickstart to an actual product that's being bought beyond the initial investors. It does take a different type of company. It does take a different type of investment beyond what they normally get. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying, once again, I agree. I agree that no, where the action is in terms of today, and it will change over time, but where the action is today is when customers are looking for an end result. When businesses and enterprises are looking for an end result and they're willing to spend that. And that can be, a lot of what we've talked about today has been on the efficiency side. So on the bottom, on the bottom of the P&L, just saving money, but it can also be on the top of the P&L, instead of the bottom line, the top line, and actually creating these services. Well, I guess like what we were talking about with your telematics service, where it's actually above and beyond, so it's a new revenue source. And for me personally, I think that's where the real interesting stuff is. Making things more efficient, of course. And that's sort of an evolution of where we are now. But when you put together all this technology and you start applying the analytics to it, you start applying some very sophisticated modeling and development to it, and you can start creating new businesses or new product revenue streams. That's where I think it gets super interesting.
That's an excellent point. There is nothing wrong in improving bottom line. It's a good job. It's a good job. But then you end up talking to back end to procurement people, and you are just another cost item. But then you create new revenue streams. You create new business cases, new scenarios, how to improve your top line, then you're talking to
a whole different story.
To business people, and those guys call the shots.
That's right. No, they do. I mean, money talks, and costs walk. That's another way of saying it. But yeah, I'd much rather be generating. But I think the conundrum that we're in, or the catch-22 that we're in, specifically in different people that I've spoken to, not my clients so much because they are more or less on board, but speaking to others, other system integrators, other product design companies, often this idea of the new revenue source is something that's kind of new, and it's maybe something that's difficult to get your head around. So, one strategy, and I think it's a great strategy, is to go in with the thin edge to wedge being the efficiency. So go in there and pitch an efficiency job initially, and then collect the data. And then after that, this is something that came from Joel Hutton a couple episodes ago, pitch the efficiency job, and after a year or so, once you've been collecting the data, then go back and all of a sudden, you open up your jacket and you point inside, the inseam of your jacket and you go, look what I have for you, and here's, right? I mean, I don't know if you've faced that, but often the market doesn't know what it doesn't know, or doesn't know what's possible, and it's hard to get their head around something that's brand new. And so efficiency makes a lot of sense. And that's why I think a lot of what you read about today is on efficiency, because it's something that people can nod their head to. It makes logical sense. It's an extension of what we have. So I don't know about you, what you think about that sales. Maybe it's different with the customers that you talk to. But what do you think about that sales approach of kind of starting with efficiency and then maybe going for top line after that?
In my view, even then you talk about efficiencies. Let's say, let's take predictive analytics, probably
Sure.
the most well-known.
Everyone loves to talk about that.
Example, moving from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive analytics.
Absolutely, yes.
But even if we start with efficiencies, eventually predictive analytics scenarios create new business cases for top line. For example, pay-per-use. So while you use data, historical data, and real-time data to predict the need for maintenance for specific asset. At the same time, you can use that data to offer customers different products, different services around it, right, and create new revenue streams. So that's why I do believe that IoT is more about business transformation. It's more about creating new business opportunities. And here, by the way, I can't help giving you another example from our recent experience. We happen to work with a large U.S. manufacturer of high-end office equipment. And like logistics, like agriculture, very traditional business. However, those guys have taken a strategic decision that their ambition go beyond just selling tables, cabinets, office chairs, whatever. And they wanted to help their clients save operational costs through smarter facilities management, and that completely change the focus of their business and generate additional revenue through the concept of so-called connected smart spaces.
Okay, got it.
And that represents major departure from a traditional model when the guys just build cabinets and office desks. But now they not only sell all that stuff, they help customers manage the equipment that they provide.
Okay. So you're saying, so that's where the operational efficiency comes in, is that they've got a better handle of where, what, when it is, and It helps their clients manage their capital expenditure, their capital expenditure investments. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, and then extending that, just along the theme of our discussion today. Cool. We've got some great operational a methodology to improve our operational efficiency. However, we're collecting all this data, right? And then I could see, where this equipment is, how this equipment is used, utility models, usability models. There could be some other interesting, things that come out of byproducts that come out of that data that maybe they initially weren't targeting. But again, it's kind of like this two punch approach where start with the efficiency, collect a bunch of data, knowing it's, you have to kind of have an idea of what you're going to be doing with the data, but then using that data in different ways. Have they gone beyond the logistical angle of it, or is that kind of where they're at right now?
What do you mean by the logistical angle?
Well, just basically managing, the operational costs of where the equipment is, how they're using the equipment. Have they gone and maybe used the information that they're collecting to do something that's top line oriented, as opposed to efficiency?
They appetite goes well beyond that.
Okay.
So they want to build some kind of smart, responsive, and adaptive environment.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So employees can feel work enjoyable and fulfilling. So
right.
So they track multiple parameters, not only whereabouts or specific piece of equipment, but they also they also track temperature. They have proximity sensors and many other things, and they also track employees' behaviors and habits. So, for example, by using machine learning, they can recommend employees certain workplaces, and this is a good solution for flexible office environment when employees don't have pre-assigned seats. So they come to the office, and and the system recommends them they can sit there because they like when it's sunny and so on and so forth. And a system can recommend that a certain like a meeting can be held in this office space and in this meeting room rather than in that one, because it's morning and the sun is from the other side of the building, and that way people won't have to use air conditioner and save some energy.
Yeah. No, I like it. No, I think that's fantastic. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and it is kind of like this two-punch approach, because now they've got a product to sell to G&A. They've got a product beyond just a capital expense, but they can, maybe sell something to HR to make their employees happier, sell something to operations to, again, improve efficiency. But it's kind of a different type of product. It's more like, for them, from their perspective, it's a top line product.
Right, and
awesome.
Look just what is happening in retail. So we are witnessing a revival of traditional retail. And despite the fact that, according to recent research, 50% of all Americans will use Amazon for holiday shopping. Amazon itself has just opened the first, traditional brick and mortar retail store in Seattle.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, and all those beacon technologies, digital signage, they can transform dramatically the traditional retail business.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's definitely a topic that we can spend another hour on. But this has been really good, Michael. I've really enjoyed it. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and Luxoft?
First of all, traditionally on the internet, www.luxoft.com, Luxoft. And we regularly participate in different industry events. I will be at the CES, and
yes,
would love to connect with anyone if some of our listeners will be there in Las Vegas. And we are also participating in IoT event in San Diego in the end of February.
Which one's that?
I think it's called IoT World or something like that. Focus specifically on industrial IoT. Pretty small boutique event, but the crowd will be comprised primarily of the corporate executives interested in IoT technologies. And we're going to have a booth there, and most likely we will demonstrate our retail digital signature demo. And some other technologies. And I also have a speaking slot, and the topic will be transformational power of IoT. We briefly touched that topic at our session today, but of course, everyone is more than welcome to attend there. That is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is we're going to put your Twitter handle in the show notes. We will put the link to the San Diego events. And just for people listening to this potentially after this will be in January 2016. And same with CES is what we're talking about. But okay, so all this information we'll put in the show analysis notes, so you don't have to write it down as you're running, driving, walking, whatever doing your marathon on your own. You won't have to stop and write it down. But thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Like usual, it was a pleasure. And like usual, we've been on the same wavelength for, I guess, since the beginning. So that's great.
Thank you, Bruce. And the pleasure was all mine. And thank you for having me here. And looking forward to our next encounters in the future.
Okay, well, that was episode 39. For summaries, links, and other valuable resources, like usual, go to the show analysis notes. They can all be found on my website, iot-inc.com/podcasts. Well, now I could use your help. We're trying to get this show off the ground, and the best way to get discovered is with iTunes. So if you've enjoyed the episode or found it informative, I'd really appreciate a review. All you have to do is go to iot-inc.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you to our iTunes page where you can let people know what you think by simply giving the show a star review or leaving a comment. I'd really appreciate that. If you'd like to learn more about the business of the Internet of Things, visit my media site. It can be found at iot-inc.com. There you'll find other podcasts as well as articles, videos, and information about upcoming live events like my stream meetups and webinars. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a greenlit one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.